well-known name in the history of Saginaw, Michigan. So what was his claim to fame? He was a pioneer blacksmith during Saginaw's frontier years, and while it is difficult to imagine now, Michigan was part of the western frontier very early on. Now, I'm going to break away here for just a moment and show you some clips that I shot this morning of the site where a blacksmith shop was built by Harvey Williams, and I'll tell you more about that, but let's first take a look at these few clips. I'm out on the west side. This is the site where Harvey Williams' mill where he had built it originally, and then he built across the river later. The river's right there. I forget what this building was used for here. This brick building. It's not a newer building, but now I think it's used for some kind of nurses training or something. And then behind it is not the grain mill that I took you to the other day, but it's another grain mill. But anyway, it's kind of interesting just to set what this looks like now against the backdrop of what Uncle Harvey Williams had here. Here's another view of the site where the mill was. I wonder how Harvey Williams would have felt if he'd have known that somewhere in the future there was going to be a national chain restaurant with golden arches right there. He could have just popped over there and gotten himself a cheeseburger. And then flying in the background is that beautiful, beautiful, huge American flag. And I don't know how that can terrorize anybody in our country, any American. You can't really be an American if that flag upsets you. Okay. Back in the 1860s, 70s, and 80s, Saginaw was the lumber capital of the world, and Uncle Harvey Williams was attributed it as having started it all. In my collection of relics, I have a nice group of lumbering artifacts that can easily be credited to Mr. Williams as their producer, judging them on where they were found. They were found at that site that I just showed you, but many, many, many years ago now. And they were found by my friend Gil, that most of you have seen on here before. Now I'll show you some of those artifacts towards the end of the video. But much of the following is taken from the Saginaw County Hall of Fame publication. And I don't know if it's still published, but I sure am appreciative of the people who worked on this and preserved some very interesting things, not just about Harvey Williams, but many of Saginaw's most notable citizens over the years. Now, as it has been recorded, Harvey Williams was a pioneer blacksmith and manufacturer of agricultural implements, and he also was a pioneer engine builder in the Saginaw Valley. Now, Uncle Harvey's life, was quite full before he ever set foot on the banks of the Saginaw River. He was born in July of 1794 at Worcester County, Massachusetts, and when he was only 16, he went to Boston, where he was apprenticed to a blacksmith and wagon maker. Now, during the War of 1812, Harvey Williams served in the Boston militia, and then following a brief stay in Albany, New York, he joined his parents and his siblings in Detroit, Michigan. Now, traveling to Detroit in 1815 was not an easy trip. First, he traveled to Buffalo by wagon, and then from there by schooner to Detroit, a voyage that took him 13 days. It was in Detroit that Mr. Williams opened a blacksmith shop, which was a success right out the gate. And he manufactured steel traps, axes, and plows. And I have some nice examples I'm going to show you of the axes that he did produce. Mr. Williams also set up the first stationary steam engine in the Michigan Territory before Michigan became a state. And it was used to pipe water to the citizens of Detroit. A 3-inch pipe served the whole population of Detroit at that time. There are many more accomplishments in Harvey Williams' life, such as building the engine for the first steam mill operated in the territory, and built 2 steam engines for the steamboat Michigan, and he also fabricated 40 tons of ironwork for Michigan's first substantial jail. He was a very busy man, and it was not long, and young Williams's shop was earning over $10,000 per year, which was an incredible amount of money for that time. In the fall of 1822, the troops stationed at the Fort Saginaw were running low on provisions, and the U.S. quartermaster stationed in Detroit called on Williams to get 4 tons of supplies from Detroit to the garrison at Saginaw. And if you thought that the trip to Detroit was bad, the trip to Saginaw was horrendous. There were no roads at that time, of course, only time-worn Indian trails, and stands to reason then that there were no bridges, so they had to ford the Clinton River 5 times, and then ford the Thread, the Cass, the Flint, the Pine, and the Elm rivers. And by the time the supplies reached this Saginaw garrison, the troops were found to be in a most famished state. They were out of just about everything. And while at the fort, Mr. Harvey talked with some of the soldiers, and the soldiers predicted that Saginaw would become an important city one day. I doubt that they would have realized how important it was to become. Uncle Harvey kept that in mind, and in 1834 he decided to give Saginaw a try. And his first order of business was to build a steam sawmill for his nephews Gardner and Ephraim Williams. And it was located at the foot of Mackinac Street and was the first sawmill on the Saginaw River. Now, that's at the site that I just showed you at the beginning of the video. Interestingly, the mill's engine had originally powered, this is so cool, had originally powered the first steamboat on the Great Lakes, which was named Walk in the Water. Now, I do have a video here on the channel about the Walk in the Water, and I'll try my best to remember to put it in the description so that you can check that out if you'd like to. Then, even as some short-sighted folk called him a fool, he began his second project, which was pretty ambitious too, which was to build a large new sawmill on the east side of the Saginaw River for himself. Now, from what I understand, it was almost directly across the river from where he built the blacksmith shop for his nephews. There were those who could not imagine that in Uncle Henry's lifetime that the Saginaw River would be lined with sawmills, and that Saginaw would become the lumber capital of the world. But from the humble beginning of one blacksmith shop and one sawmill, it took off gangbusters. But then, 1837 came, and with it a disaster came also. And not a disaster that just struck Saginaw, but all of the United States. The Great Panic of 1837, it was called. And it was the worst depression the nation had ever seen, and Saginaw was hit particularly hard. To it, Dennis? Okay. All right. Mr. C.D. Little reported that hundreds of mechanics and laborers who had enjoyed great prosperity were thrown out of work. Employers who had considered themselves to be millionaires and part of the elite were reduced to laboring men, and paper currency, once considered as good as gold, could not be sold a bushelful for $1. Many people had no choice except to leave Saginaw, but Uncle Harvey had to close his mill, which did not reopen until 1848 when it was bought by a Mr. Kurt Emerson. But he never lost faith in the Saginaw area. Williams had been a leading figure. Williams had been a leading figure in the movement to get a lighthouse at the mouth of the Saginaw River, and he became the very first lighthouse keeper when that actually finally happened. And at the time, Michigan's lakes and rivers were teeming with all kinds of fish, lip-smacking tasty bluegills to 100-pound sturgeons, huge fish. And not a man to miss an opportunity. Uncle Harvey opened a successful fishery, and he even sent a package of Mackinac salmon trout to President Abraham Lincoln. Now, Mr. Williams was not a Republican. He was a Democrat, but he admired President Lincoln. And Mr. Williams greatly admired the president, as I said, and he treasured a thank you note that he had received from him. At age 80, Mr. Williams, again, was a Democrat, but made a 40-mile trip in his fishing boat in order to cast his vote for President Lincoln. And during the winter, he traded with the Chippewa Indians. C.D. Little also had this to say, and I quote, "No man ever possessed the confidence of those Indians that Uncle Harvey has, and certainly no man could ever be kinder and more generous to them than he was, end quote. Mr. Williams was married to Julia Fournier in 1819, the year that the Treaty of Saginaw was signed here with the Chippewa Indians and Lewis Cass. And they were together for about 57 years, which is about the same amount of time that my dad and mom were married. She was known to be a woman of great charity and never turned away the poor and needy from her door. Uncle Harvey Williams passed in 1876 at 82 years of age. A close friend wrote of him, "His strict integrity and his honest industry is a legacy he bestows on a later generation, an honorable inheritance that should be cherished and emulated by all." Now, let me take a few moments to show you a clip of the blacksmith-made relics that I have, that I attribute to that mill that Uncle Harvey built, and to his nephews Gardner and Ephraim. And then they'll be followed by some still shots too. So I hope you'll enjoy that. I've laid out here a selection of relics from my collection that could reasonably be attributed to Uncle Harvey Williams because of the location that they were originally found in. And so I'm going to give you a close-up look at these in just a moment. Some very interesting pieces in here. This is Mama Kitty. This is Shadow. She's an outdoor kitty, and she's very expecting. I enjoyed being here with you. I love you all very much on the other side of that monitor, and I hope to be back with you again real soon. Thanks for watching. God bless each and every one of you. Stay well, stay safe, and stay happy. Oh, and stay a subscriber of the Dennis Morrison channel. And if you're not, I invite you now to subscribe. God bless.